chapter 8, if we have to go back and look at the chapter as a whole and have to give a short description of that, what would we say about chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians? How would we kind of give a short summary of it? Or can we? Okay. EJ?
So you have some collecting, you have knowledge to do right and wrong. Which one you going to choose? You going to choose the false leaders, or you going to go with the main leader?
Okay.
That's what I'm picking up.
What else? Yes, Nancy.
Didn't they talk about the giving?
Yep.
And the collection that they promised to make sure that they're always through with the promise?
That's correct. I think that's the main one. Of course, we have subtitles or sub-lessons coming out of this. The generosity. What was the purpose behind it? You really have to take chapter 8 and chapter 9 together. What was the purpose of their giving, generosity, or liberality? What was the reason behind it, brother?
Well, it was a big family around Jerusalem, that area, so all the saints survive, so
Others. Yep.
Christ to help them out.
And in this chapter, what was Paul's reflection about the church at Corinth with other churches? Did he not kind of boast about them a little bit, saying, hey, the brethren over there are doing this, trying to maybe motivate the other churches, but yet we find, let's see, where's my verse at? We find in verse 10, okay, that they started to make plans, did they not, in verse 10? And then how long was it after they made plans that they not decided to go ahead and start? Yeah, a year. So Paul kind of, I don't want to say slap their hand, but they made these plans a year later. They haven't implemented them yet. Can we get a lesson of that today for us? I hope so. And what is that one word? Procrastination. Yeah, I'll plan today, but I'll put off, and then I'll put off, and then I'll put off. And sometimes it may get done, sometimes it may not. So they had good intentions and went through, made those plans, but yet they got a little bit rebuked. Then we go down into verse 12, 13, and 14. And going back and listening to the lesson back in September the 6th, hopefully I've got a grasp on it. If I don't, y'all correct me. I don't know everything about the Bible. I'm learning. But in these verses, I get the idea that the Corinthian brothers had a lot. They had a lot to give out of their abundance. I'm telling you, I'm not electronic. Daniel, help. I don't know if I had the mic or need to be somewhere else. Okay, yeah, that's me. Yeah, they had a purpose. And if I understand, the brethren over in Jerusalem had the need. Okay. They had more, they had less. So in looking at these verses, the Corinthian brothers gave out of their more, right? To give to the Christians in Jerusalem into their less. So in doing so, they're like a scale, are they not? Okay. So we get the idea, I think, that the church there had a need. They had a need to give. The brother in Jerusalem had a need. They had it because of the family. But yeah, you have to put the two together. So what I'm trying to drive at, if somebody has a need and doesn't tell folks about that need, how can other people help, or the church can help? Okay. Is that not where the closeness, we are a family at this location, the Corinthian brothers were a family. But yet, if we have needs within the congregation and those needs aren't brought forward, how can the church help, or individuals help? Does that make sense? Am I off base? Close? Counting right on. The verse 15 is counting the cap to this series of verses 8 through 14. Verse 15 is really the cap to this thing. So given that, we may spend the rest of our class on verse 15. If we go over and look, Paul goes back to the Old Testament and brings out a real good example back there to bring forth to the Corinthians in this situation that we can use and apply today to ourselves. Hopefully we can see that connection. Verse 15 says, as it is written, he who gathers much do not have too much, and he who gathered little had no lack. Now where did that scripture come from in the Old Testament? We need to go back and understand those events. Nancy?
It was in Exodus.
Okay.
16, 18.
16 and 18, anybody that's got it, kind of summarize what was going on back in Exodus 16. Once we understand Exodus 16 and why Paul brought it forward and placed it right here in this Corinthian letter at the point he did, it makes those ideas and thoughts in Corinthians a whole lot stronger. So what was the event surrounding Exodus 16, 18? Amy.
They were in the wilderness and they were saying, oh, if we had just died in Egypt, and they were complaining.
Yeah, what was one thing the children of Israel back then did most?
Complaining.
They, didn't have enough water. You brought us out here, Red Sea on one side, Pharaoh on the other, all that sort of thing. At this point, they were complaining about food, were they not? We don't have enough to eat. So what did God provide?
Manna from heaven.
Manna from heaven, okay? So they had a food source. Now, what was some of the stipulations we have to understand about this manna?
They could only gather what they were going to eat for the day.
For the day. What happened if they gathered more in the next morning?
Was it rotten?
It was rotten. Wouldn't you get the worms? And there was an exception to that, was there not?
That's
Sad that they gathered to,
Yeah.
supposed to do no work, so God allowed that. I can see where the first time folks just gathered, because they didn't know if they were going to have food the next day. Just moved to them, gathered up, and the next morning it was all worms. I can see that. But the wisdom of God, can you see the wisdom of God in this? Because they were supposed to go and measure, I don't know what that measurement is, but they're supposed to measure, and that's all they get for that day. Okay. So the wisdom of God is everybody's going to be on an equal plane. No one's going to have too much, no one's going to have too less.
And they gathered for what you need for your size of family.
Yeah. So I want to throw a couple of scenarios out, a couple of left field balls out here. What happens if, say, one day, one of the children, the Israelite, was sick, couldn't get out, the lady was in childbearing, somebody went out late and didn't gather enough. What happened to those folks? Did they live out? So sorry. You have to wait the next day to get filled. What about those that did go and gather, came back and they measured off and they had this excess? So they went and helped their brothers, did they not? Hey, you didn't get to go out. Here's my excess. Here you go. Or you went out late, you didn't get that. I got some more. I mean, it's going to go bad anyway. You might as well, take it now. Bring that to Corinthians chapter 8, verse 15. Out of Corinth's abundance, they gave to the needs of the Jews or the Christians in Jerusalem. So they that had much did not like, but yet those that liked. So there's the balance. Understand, or did I explain it wrong, or getting a lot of places saying yes and some that didn't. That's my understanding of this verse. So out of abundance, folks aren't gonna like anything. Yet they turn around and help those that do like, where they don't like anymore, or any less. They have enough, they're sufficient. Does that make sense? Yes.
I just
Go
don't
ahead.
want to confuse this with the ones that were lazy and didn't want
Oh.
to get out there. and get
Yep. That could happen too, could it not? Hey, if I don't have to do anything, put folks to bring, and
Right, and that's,
that's not right either, so maybe it's the folks that bring, hey, listen. At peer pressure, yeah, they can be things like that, so, to the Corinthians, I found, I don't like going into commentaries, but I did on this one. It made sense to fit here. Adam Clark says, in their course, had gathered more than was absolutely necessary, talking about the Corinthians, for their own support, by giving the surplus to the persecuted and impoverished Christian Jews, these would be made equal. Now question the Christian Jews. Jerusalem had more than just Jews, they had Gentiles too, but Christians, in fact, what he's talking about, one had a surplus, their needs were met, they went out with their surplus and helped those that did not have a surplus or had needs, and they became equal. The literal Bible, I went into that translation, I kind of liked it as far as this verse goes. It said, even as it had been written, he gathering much had nothing left over, and he gathering little had no less. So that kind of capsized. Any questions or comments? While I look over my notes. So we find that there's a need of the church to give, and we can understand that today too. If this location was in that position, eventually we will be. If we had that surplus, the building was paid off, the preacher's self-supported, and we just get coming a surplus, and we would have that need. So our need would be to give, but yet the need of folks needs to be aware that, they have a need. Because what's one of the functions of the church? There's three, and benevolence is one of those functions. But if the church doesn't know somebody's in need, then how can they fulfill that need? Point of question. Give an example of myself. Most everybody knows what the family's been through, what I've been through in the last 6 months, 8, 9 months. Back in December, very few knew of the situation in January, February, and going into March. With no income coming in, you sit there and look, I wonder where, money for this, that, food, shelter, what have you. In my position, I went to the elders and say, we may have a need. I'm not sure. And so far, we're still afloat. We haven't had any creditors come and call us up and say, hey, we need our money, or haven't gone hungry. I lost a little bit of weight during that time. Haven't gone hungry. Still have shelter, but yet there might have been a point in time where no check coming in, no income, nothing, and all of a sudden here we are, what do we do? So at that point, we let the elders know there may be a need. Now I could have stepped back and said, I'm not going to tell anybody, and just maybe suffer through it. But with prayers to God and God's help, somehow we made it through those months, and everything, came back rosy as far as I'm concerned. It was tough months for us, but yet we could have decided not to tell anybody, and that would have been wrong, would it not? On our part. Because remember, even though we may not have surplus, we would still have to take care of our own. Would we not? Even though this is talking about manna and about wealth, I like to think about it's just more than just money. What else do we have that we can give? Or I think time. Yeah, our time. Hey, I got a little bit of time, and maybe this brother or sister over here, may need some encouragement, some help, go to them. Or better yet, hey, I have enough, some more time. I can look at my family unit. I'm the husband, I look at my wife, hey, do you need help? And so I got an hour or two. My son Zach, I don't have to really go out and stay within the family unit. So we can give over our time. What else can we give? Just my life experience. What happens if somebody lands in the hospital? What happens to the family? Provide maybe a meal or two along the way. If somebody's been out, death in the family is usually a good time to provide a newborn. Somebody's moved, believe me, that's a challenge. Move and try to eat along the way. So food is provided, meals are provided. I've had old clothes that are still good. Old to the first people that had them, they're still good to wear to make it through tough times. So no clothing. What I'm looking at is just possessions. How many times that we may have vehicle problems and no transportation? I've had folks come up and say, hey, I have an extra vehicle you can use in the meantime so you can get back on your feet. I've had that happen. So it's more to it than just money, is it not? Our time or possessions that we have. We find in James chapter 5, if you'd like to be turning there, I'll make a comment, verses 2 to 5. Wealth should be employed in the service which God designs. Wealth that is stored up and not properly used to God's designs then becomes an offense in the sight of those holy and benevolent minds. Somebody read James chapter 5, or James chapter 5, 2 through 5.
Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten, and your gold and your silver are rusted, and their rust shall be for a testimony against you, and shall eat your flesh as fire. You have laid up your treasure in the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who mow your fields, which is of you kept back by God, cried out, and the cries of them that reap have entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. You have lived delicately on the earth, and have taken your pleasure. You have nourished your hearts in the day of slaughter.
If we look at that, riches, if we don't use them, they just lay around, they become corrupt, they're no good, and that's not the intent of God. Even if we're considered ourselves poor, we still may be rich in something to give to someone else. I go back in my lifetime as an example that fits this indication. I was at a congregation in my youth many years ago that the elders didn't spend the Lord's money. They had the mortgage paid off, the preacher was self-sufficient, they had current bills coming in, but they were just afraid, and they had a large sum. Finally, they admitted to the congregation, hey, once we start spending the money, that something's going to happen to the building, the building breaks down, air conditioner breaks down, something, and they wouldn't have that resource. So they took it upon themselves after praying and what have you, that they started spending the money in evangelism, edification, and benevolence. Basically the work of the church. And to their surprise, most of it went into evangelism, supporting outside preachers. And to their surprise, that when they started doing that, what do you think happened to the treasury? It didn't go down. In fact, folks in that congregation started realizing they're starting to move the money, they're starting to support others and doing things in the work of the church that for several months, treasury went up, giving with because they understood that the money was going out and was doing, the good for the work of the church there. So that made the believers out of a lot of. So that was in a college town that happened then, and that always went with me to a congregation that was in that position that they were going, hey, listen, we need to, they had elders and men in the congregation to, move on that. And y'all may have similar situations. So to their elders that was responsible for that, when they started that, they would have to give account, but they not, God, hey, we set on all this money. It's like the one talent person. 5 talent went out and got more, 2 talent went out and got more, than 1 talent, this county afforded it. So they started and increased, and even today they are dynamic in that town. So looking at verse 15, what applications can we make for today? We got it to the Corinthian brothers, and we can look at 12, 13, and 14. Can we make any applications today, any scriptures we can go to that help support any thoughts that y'all may have? I got a few. I may throw 1 or 2 out just to kind of stimulate. What about doing good to the household of God? Galatians 6:10, you are to do what according to that verse? Do good to others, but to who especially? To ourselves, okay, to the household, to our family of God that we may have. In our giving, what does the next chapter say, 2 Corinthians 9, as far as our giving goes? And we usually quote it when we get up here for contribution. Cheerful, yeah. Well, to first purpose, and that doesn't mean to come in here and open up the billfold right when we sit down and say, well, let's see how much cash we got. I don't think it means that when we get paid, we write off all the bills and do what we want to, and then whatever's left over, well, that's the Lord's. I think it means that we need to realize that income comes in or what have you, that we need to sit first and say, hey, this is what we're going to give, and then everything else falls in. Brother Warren.
No, I think maybe something we should consider is Christians, we're all family. And I think most of us do and probably should strive to make that a priority. If we're aware of a need, even another group of Christians who hasn't engaged, we're reading about it. Natural disasters happen to everybody anywhere every time. So there are occasions when people who in the group or people to stand on their own and do sufficient aren't able to do. And I think we have an obligation to.
Sure.
If we have an abundance, we should be able to contribute in that try to help those people out. Now, if we have extra, and most of us really truly got a little extra, and we're this country is the richest country. So as far as abundance, speaking personally, if I see something that I think is a good thing, it's not even related to the church whatsoever. I try to spread a little bit here and a little bit there. It is a little bit. So I think I feel better about it because I'm making the effort to try to do what.
There may be a point in time where the church cannot do that, but yet individuals can. Natural disaster, what all have we been through? Probably been more years now. Katrina, tornadoes down in Florida. I think on the natural side of it, that the church here may not as a collective unit, but yet we as individuals can seek out those individuals and do it on a one-on-one basis. And unlike Warren, I don't think it's the amount, but it's the attitude, the willingness to do what we can do.
But that idea of being a cheerful giver, I think about that. I think we've all bought things and spent money on things that we've regretted. We've all had that buyer's remorse. We bought that car that we thought, well, that was not so smart. We spent money on all these things, but I don't think any of us can look back and say, and with regret, and say, I wish I wouldn't have given so much to the Lord. I wish I wouldn't have helped those people out. You don't see that buyer's remorse there.
Yeah.
And You know, I think when we're spending our money well, I think in retrospect, we are cheerful about it at least, even if we aren't at the time.
I don't know, in my life, when I do have my priorities right, I think God has come back and blessed my family more, but then again, I've been in points of time in life where I've really got them skewed way off. And what do you think God did in those times? You know, he was there. But he wasn't blessing the family. In fact, he was probably allowing things to happen, because according to 2 Corinthians 10:13, the temptation, he's not going to have us bear what we can't bear. And those times he was probably allowing those temptations on us to discipline us to get us back to where we need to be. What about the rich young ruler in Mark chapter 10? He was rich, he had all these things. He went to Jesus and said, what else do I like? Have eternal life. And Jesus told him to do what?
Sell all his riches.
Sell everything you got, get it, follow me. And what happened to that individual? Yeah, he went away, he just, you know. But yet, it seems that he had enough, more than enough, to satisfy his needs, you know. But yet, Jesus told him to go sell everything. 2 chapters later in Mark, chapter 12, Jesus sitting in the treasury, looking at folks going and dropping their income, money, what have you, into the treasury. And there was a person that came and gave some. You know, the event surrounding that.
It was the one woman gave everything she had. And he said that was more than all these rich people.
Those individuals giving out of their surplus, here's a widow with 2 mites, all the livelihood she had, went with the proper attitude and gave it. And Jesus said she gave more than the rest. Just a couple examples. I found this I thought was pretty good. I'll share with you. The general rule of stewardship and giving in the New Testament is the proportion. Okay? Bear with me. Relative to one's ability, to one's possessions. So can we, if we don't have it to give, can we give? So it's within our ability, and each one has different abilities, different possessions, so therefore what should be different about their giving? Each one will give what, a different amount when it comes to the collection. There's times recently that, you know, Sunday morning I come and I just don't have it. I think it's embarrassing when the plate comes, but yet it shouldn't be. But yet, in the time that we do have it, we gave more. So that does fluctuate. So it's our ability. And then the question would be, what is that portion of the Christian possessions that you should give? And then it ties into what in the Old Testament everybody likes to go to. About tithing. Okay. That's in the Old Testament, correct? What happened to the old law, the Old Testament? Done away with. How was it done away with? It just went through a week. Nailed to the cross. Okay. Does the New Testament have any regulations on how much? No. God looked at what though in our giving? We just mentioned it. Our attitude, our purpose, you know. As you prosper. We can go back to King Saul. He saved the best of King Agag, even though God said to destroy everything. God said it's not bulls and goats and all that. I wanted you to obey. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think we need to go back to that you have to purpose in your heart. I mean, I think, you know, if you purpose in your heart, I think that when, I mean, I know there's hard times, but, you know, you probably have something in that plate when it goes by.
Yeah.
If you purpose in your heart. I mean, I don't want to say, I don't want to be hard about it, but I mean, if you purpose in your heart, you know, you'd have something in that place. I
And it's tough to say, man, I got all these bills, but yeah, I gotta set something aside first.
But that, it is
But,
first.
yeah.
It is first.
And it's amazing that whatever that amount is, everything just kind of falls in line. God's there, falls in line. He knows before we even ask, right? But we have to ask. But yet if we have that purpose, instead of just walking in, oh, let's see how much cash I got or whatever, when we sit down.
Because Christ is first. He's not the last bill, so to speak.
But yet the world has it backwards.
Exactly.
I mean, just flip it around.
But that's what, and we see that's what happened here in verse 5. You know, but before this giving happened, it says they first gave themselves to the Lord, you know. That was an outspringing of what was already in their hearts, you know. They already were that kind of people and had that intention. And then when the need came.
Yeah, and that's why they had the abundance, because they gave themselves first. I heard Vincent first and then more.
Yeah, you know, in Malachi, you talk about going back to the Old Testament, and when Christ died on the cross, the Old Testament was put away, and we're in the New Testament about give what freely you can give from your heart. But, you know, I always, in Malachi, you know, says, well, man robbed God, they didn't rob me, but you say, what way has he robbed me? And tithes and offering. And, you know, I've always been told, you know, read a tenth is what tithing is, and then the offering is from God in His Word. He told us to try Him and see when I open up windows of blessings and blah this and blah that, you know. But I'm still confused on the tithes and the offering, you know, because, you know, the tenth part. You know what I'm saying? If you give a tenth of what you own, and I was always preaching that it would take that, the more you give, the more He gives back to you. Okay, I can understand that, and you know, regardless of what I want to give out of heart, I believe that the more you give, the more you get back to you. But you know, I'm still ain't really got it down packed with the tithes and the offering.
It's real simple. When it comes to that, it was nailed to the cross. Okay. Colossians 2:12 through 14, the old law, the Old Testament was nailed to the cross of Jesus. So we don't have to worry about the 10, all that. What Jesus and God the Father is looking at for us today is within our heart, within our means. You know, if it's $1 and gave right, that's all He's asking. You know, if it's $100 or whatever, it's, you know, from the heart part. Let me get Warren, then Keith. Warren?
Oh, I was looking back at Ecclesiastes. Not been that long ago we studied chapter 5, beginning verse 10. There's a section there that I'm sure 17 or 18. But I think it's a pretty good guide into the inside of people and their behavior and money, that kind of thing. So I think all that plays a part of that. I always remember verse 10 where it says, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied." He will not be satisfied with silver, which means he'll never get enough, right? And there are a lot of people who fall into that trap. You know, we're also thought about evil for other money, not money, but for love of it. So those are the things we need to remember together.
Pursuing of that. Keith, has a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you talk about the tithing and then when we get to the New Covenant, New Testament, how Jesus had done away with this whole requirement of tithing. But we can't look at it as like, oh, great, now we don't have to give 10%, we can give less. If you think it that way, then you're not seeing what God wanted, what God was trying to do. He wants to see our purpose in our heart. So if we're saying, oh, now we can save money by not giving to God, our purpose in our heart is not right. You know, and actually, the requirement of tithing was a lot simpler than what we have now. Tithing was like, hey, it's flat 10%. We give whatever 10% of it. Now we have to look at our heart and we have to decide, you you know, I've got to, you put God first, you know, I've got to give what I can give to God because he's given it to me. So actually that requirement is harder now than it was back then.
But
Right.
wasn't it at 10% of everything?
Yes,
Not just
yes.
funds? Right, but it's of your
Yeah.
travel, of everything, everything.
Cross board, EJ.
Well, my sense of humor kicked in when Dana was talking, but when you were talking about this and talking about that. It kicked in and said, let that pizza alone, you can put whatever cost that coke off in the church.
Yeah, that might be the way we need to look at it.
My sense of humor kicks in anytime.
Maybe that's it, you know, we walk into, I really need this because it's done.
I'm sorry.
Or, I like that. It makes you realize, does it not? Let's see, we got about 8 more minutes. Some New Testament examples. I knew we weren't going to get to verse 15, but that's okay. Can we think of some New Testament examples that they gave because there was a need? And it wasn't really how much they gave that they did give. Can you think of any New Testament, especially in Acts, things that's happened?
Well, when you think of Ananias and Sapphira and the giving that they did, they gave way more than a tenth. But the purpose of their giving was for show, and they lied about what they gave. And so they gave way more than a tenth, which is even what they were asked to do. They weren't even asked to give everything from what they sold. They just lied about what they gave.
That was the negative part, was when they sold it, then they had the power to say how much
Right.
to get them. So that's on the negative end, which is good. Nancy?
And then you had Barnabas.
Yeah.
Who sold and gave willingly what he sold, the money to.
Yeah. Acts chapter 4. So we're coming on up into Acts. So you got Acts 4, which was Barnabas selling, giving, which county went to Ananias and Sapphira, you know, county got them, hey, you know, Barnabas got the what for doing it. You got the praise. So that may be one of the reasons why I said, hey, I want to get the praise too.
But we want the praise of God, not the praise of man. Right.
We can even go the day the church was established, Acts chapter 2. What happened in Acts chapter 2 that could be examples of their giving? Get the scenario. Jerusalem, Pentecost, everybody was traveling. Acts chapter 2, the Holy Spirit came to the apostles. They went out and preached Christ. People were converted. Those stayed, and if they stayed, what happened to their situation?
Didn't they go and sell all they had and divide it equally among them?
Yeah. So those brethren that were there that had things, sold it, came to the apostles, here we got it. They distributed it to those that had a need for them staying, because they came from a long ways away, Jerusalem, just all over the known world at that time. Again, it wasn't the amount, you know, but it was, hey, these brethren, now that they've been baptized, some were Jews, some were Gentiles. If you were a Jew, what happened? You became a Christian, then what happened? Everything Jewish heritage was just sliced down. Okay, you lost your inheritance, you lost your family, you were just, the only family you had was a spiritual family that was coming together. The background was gone. It had nothing to do. And that's a tremendous sacrifice to those individuals. I went ahead and put in chapter 9, Tabitha, making things, giving things, having kindness to others. Of course, she passed, and I think it was Peter came and resurrected her, but the widows there, the women there, were showing the things, the act of kindness that she was doing. And I kind of read between the lines thinking, well, if these ladies has clothing that she made, there was a giving, make sure their needs were met. So some examples for us. Any thoughts or comments? I like the ending because we got 2 more minutes. Acts chapter 8, or excuse me, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 15 is the cap to verses 8 through 15. If we understand those verses, and 15 comes to light. 16 through 24 builds upon that. We'll do that next week. Chuck likes me when I teach like this and only do one verse because he's got other things to discuss. But we need to understand chapter 8 and chapter 9 comes together. Okay. They all deal with the same thing. So just because we have the chapter break in there doesn't mean that. The next verses will come up and talk about Titus. We'll talk about a couple other brethren that went with Titus back to Corinth and the situation, and read 1 Corinthians 16, the first 4 or 5 verses, and understand the process that when they were collecting this money to go back to Jerusalem, what the process they had down, because you would think, well, Christians giving to Christians, why did they have to go through that process? And there is thoughts and ideas on that, on the negative side. Thank y'all for your comments. I appreciate it.